Well, the first thing I would ask, because it makes a difference in what I would say and how to deal with it, it's very important to know is, do they want to save the marriage? Do both of them agree that, yes, we'd like to make the marriage work. I'm not ready to throw the marriage away. You know, I had an affair, but I'm not ready to throw the marriage away. I still like the marriage to go on. So if the answer to that is yes, you know, they both would like the marriage to continue, then I got one set of answers. But if it's not like that, if one of them says, well, I just don't want to do this anymore, I'm done, well, then there's a different set of answers. So let's just make an assumption that they would like to stay together. Both of them would say that, yes, I really love this person and I really want to be with them. And okay, I had an affair or two or three, but it doesn't mean I want to get out of this marriage. I still want to be part of the marriage. All right. In that case, the question is, should we work on this or give it up? Would be, you should work on it. If what you both want is to have a relationship with each other, then of course you should work on it. Now, let's see what the problems are. The problem is one of ego, the hurt, the loss of trust. You know, they had this agreement. This agreement was that I'll just have sex with you and you just have sex with me, and we won't have sex with other people outside the marriage. And they made that vow probably because that's typically in a marriage vow. So at least they kind of made that promise to each other. Now somebody breaks the promise. Okay, so now there's a lack of trust. Well, what's going on is that the marriage to begin with was conditional, not unconditional. There's conditional love and there's unconditional love. Conditional love says, I want to be with you under these conditions. Outside of those conditions, no, I don't want to be with you. You see, that's conditional love, and it's really not love at all. There is no such thing as conditional love. Love is unconditional. But most of us have egos, and most of us have fears. And we fear that if we don't put conditions on it, we won't like the result. So you have a husband, he doesn't want his wife to have affairs because then it means that she doesn't like him as much, or she needs somebody else, or she wants somebody else, and he doesn't satisfy her entirely. And all of this makes him feel bad about himself. You see? So it's not so much that this makes him feel bad about her as it is that it makes him feel bad about himself. And when you make somebody feel bad about themselves, the first thing you get is anger, because what you are doing is causing a resonance with that fear. The fear of not being good enough, the fear of being inadequate, the fear of having not been as good a wife or a husband as you should have been. So it's the fear of your inadequacy that's really the problem. It's not that the wife or the husband's gone out and had an affair that's really the problem. The real problem is your inadequacy. Because you feel inadequate because your spouse went out and had sex with somebody else, that means that they broke their promise, and we can say, oh, well, it's all about trust. I just can't trust her anymore, or can't trust him anymore. Well, that's really what we pretend is the issue. But the real issue is now you feel more inadequate than you did before, and you've probably always felt inadequate. And this just makes that inadequacy worse. And that fear starts to resonate. And that fear makes you angry. How could that person do this to me? They promised not to. that's not the agreement we had, well, like I say, it's a deal. It's not love. And deals sometimes change. When you make a deal with a partner, sometimes those deals have expiration dates or they change because people change. So what you have to do is realize that the big problem is your insecurity, your lack of a sense of worth. You feel less valued, less valuable. Okay? But you see, that's not necessarily the case. The fact that somebody in a marriage had an affair does not mean that they don't value you anymore, that they don't care for you anymore, or that they don't want to be with you anymore. That's not what it means at all. It just means that they had an affair, they were attracted to someone, it became sexual, and they had sexual relations. That was just, mostly that's our instincts. Males and females have instincts that lead them to sexuality. When you suppress those instincts, okay, it causes some problems in your psyche when you suppress your instincts. And when you're not really thinking about it sometimes, those instincts just kind of rear up their ugly head and cause you to do something that you would never have planned to do, but it just turned out that way. You just fell into it. It was you maybe wanted a little excitement or passion in your life, or a little bit the way it was when you were 20-something, with all of those feelings, and wow, that feels so good. And you just wanted to play with that a little bit because that felt good to be back in that excitement and that passionate state that you had when you were much younger and in your relationship. But as people grow older and older and older and stay together a long time, mostly their life becomes practical and not so passionate. But that doesn't mean that the need for that passion and the enjoyment of it isn't there. It's just that the circumstances aren't there to support that. So somebody has an affair. You see, the affair doesn't say, I don't like you anymore, so I had to have an affair because I just can't stand you anymore. That's why I asked the question, do they really like each other? Do they want to be together? Okay, because if they do, then that affair means almost nothing. It just means that instincts overpowered intellect, and one thing led to another, and it ends up being sexual. Okay, now the way we suppress our instinct is with our intellect. The instinct says, that's a good looking babe, wow, I'd like to be alone with her, that's what your instinct says, but your intellect says, get over it, she's too young, she's this, she's that, my wife would go nuts, you think about those other things and you say, well, I better not. Okay, so your intellect has to overcome the instinct because we instinctually want to have sex with the opposite sex people. I mean, our instincts aren't centered around, are we married? Are we not married? Our instincts are centered around male, female, the connection between male and female. Has nothing to do with legal documents, that are on file someplace that say you're married. Instincts don't know about documents. They only know about feelings. And those instincts create feelings in us. It's just part of being human. And sometimes we just are in a situation where we let those instincts ride. We don't suppress them. So I'd say, see the real problem. The problem is your fear. The problem is your insecurity. The problem is that you're feeling not good enough. You've failed. Okay? And your spouse has had to go wander to find things. Instead of taking that attitude of hurt and oh no, and it's awful and broke the trust and all of that nonsense, which is basically boiling down to your feelings were hurt, your ego has been hurt, and now the ego wants to, it's not get even, but it wants to kind of deny that it's your insecurity that's the problem. So it wants to point the finger at the other person and say, that's the problem. I'm doing just fine, but he did that or she did that, and that's the problem. And that needs to stop. Well, everybody can agree and promise, okay, I'll never do that again. I had sex outside of marriage and I'll never do that again. But that's not necessarily going to happen or not happen. We're human beings. We have instincts. We get into situations where those instincts grab hold of us, and it takes a lot of willpower and intellect to just say no. Okay? And how important is it to just say no? If you really love somebody, then that love is without constraints. That's love without, here are the conditions. That's real love. There are no conditions. And sweetheart, if you need that, if that's something that puts a little joy and excitement in your life, then go do it. If that's something you have to do or something that you couldn't stop from doing because your instincts pushed you in that direction, then that's okay. I still love you. You still love me. Nothing's changed in our relationship so much as you needed a little adventure on the side. And if that's what you want, then I'm glad you got that. I'm glad it worked for you. And now that other person who was the transgressor and had the sex out of marriage, they'll love you 10 times as much because you actually understand and you care for them. And it's really about them, and there are no conditions, and they feel that love that is unconditional. And they now love you 10 times more than they did before because you're really special. Not many people would do that or be able to do that, would be able to overcome their ego enough to do that. So you pull them even closer to you. So you see, when you want to own somebody, you create problems. Marriage isn't about ownership. You don't become each other's slave. You don't own each other. When you own somebody, you're transgressing over them as their free will, them as individual people. You see, but we get that idea. All right, we're married. Now we own each other. I own you, and here's the restrictions. You can't do this and the other thing because I own you, and I don't want you to do that because it makes me feel bad about myself. Well, feeling bad about yourself is not their problem. It's your problem. And you want to make it their problem because you don't want to deal with it. So instead of you dealing with it and getting rid of that fear that makes you feel inadequate, you want them to solve that problem for you by not ever doing anything that makes you feel inadequate. You see? So that's not the way it's supposed to work. You need to deal with your problems and let the other person deal with their problems. And you're the only one that can deal with your problems. And your spouse is the only one that can deal with their problems. Problems are yours to deal with. It's not like, okay, I have this problem, honey, solve it for me. I need to grow up, get rid of my ego. You can't do that. So realize where the problem is. That's yours to deal with, and deal with it. Love her or him or whichever one was the transgressor just the same. Let them be. There's an old saying that says, if a butterfly comes and lands on your finger, enjoy it, observe it, love it, and let it go free. And if it wants to, it may come back and sit on your finger again. But if it doesn't, that's okay. You let it go. And you have to do that with everything. Something good comes into your life, You have to appreciate it and care for it and love it. But if it decides it needs to leave, or even leave for a while, then you have to let it go free. And if it wants to come back, then good. Something lovely comes back into your life, and that's wonderful. If it doesn't come back, well, you go on with your life. It'll put you in a whole new space and a whole new adventure. See that as an adventure. So this idea of we have to make sure that we don't trigger a fear in the other person. Well, you don't want to trigger fears, and in general, you try to avoid triggering fears in another person. But that's really not the key reason why you're here, is to not trigger other people's fears. The reason you're here is to get rid of your own fears. So, love is unconditional. If it's conditional, it's not love, it's need. So the person that feels hurt has a need, has issues, has fears, has problems, and these get triggered. Well, don't throw away a good relationship where both people would like that relationship to continue because your ego's too big to deal with the fear. You see, that's dysfunctional. If you got a good relationship and you really enjoy being with each other, well, you probably are so connected with all that time that you know what each other thinks and what each other feels. And it's good being with somebody that you understand and understands you that much. Don't throw all that away, all of that time, all that investment. That's valuable. Okay, somebody had sex with somebody else. Is that really a big deal? Well, it's only a big deal if they say, yeah, I had sex with somebody else and I don't ever want to be around you anymore. I want to live my life someplace else. You're a drag on me. All right, now that's a bigger deal because now you're going to have to change. You're going to have to, your life, that other person's going away and you're going to have to go on with your life without them. Well, if that happens, then deal with it. Deal with it positively. Think about, a new adventure coming my way. I wonder what's going to happen. I'll deal with it positively, you see. But if it's not that, if it's just that, no, well, yeah, my instincts got the best of me, and that's what happened. I'm sorry, but I still want to be with you, and I still want to spend my life with you. Well, then spend your life with them. And if they have another affair, well, that's okay too. It just doesn't matter. As long as the butterfly wants to keep coming back and sitting on your finger, let it go free. And if it always comes back to you, then you don't own that butterfly, you see? That's the problem. We don't own somebody else. And they must do this because that's what the rules said. And that's what we all promised 30 years ago. That's putting a set of conditions on a relationship. And that's not love. That's a bargain. It's a deal. It's a pact. It's a contract. And contracts get broken in time. Contracts should have expiration dates on them. Any good business contract has an expiration date on it. They don't just run forever. And if you think that they can run forever, it's generally a mistake because they often don't. People change, needs change, situations change. And it may be 1 in 100 that you just so happen to be in the situation where you get overpowered by your instincts and it just seems like the right thing to do in the moment, even though your intellect says, shouldn't do that, you're going to cause a problem, but your instincts overwhelm you. You get in that situation. Maybe it's a 1 in 100 that you'll find yourself in that situation. Well, it happens. If you find yourself in that situation, it'll probably happen to you, the other one, the other partner. If they just happen to be in that situation, their instincts probably would overwhelm them too, and then they'd understand. But some people's intellects are stronger than others. Some people's feelings and some people's instincts are stronger than others. And you have to let people be who they are. You don't make such a big deal over something that is really, in the big picture, not such a big deal. All right, a promise has been broken. Goodness, you're going to fall on your sword because of that? And a perfectly good relationship that's been going on for a long time because of that? Nah, that's not that. The relationship's a much bigger deal than the fact that somebody had sex outside that relationship. That's just a thing that happens. Let it be. Be honest with each other. See, that's the point. There should be integrity in a relationship. And where it really went wrong was when the one who had the sex out of the relationship should have told the other one, should have said, I'm getting close to this person and it's really making me feel a little zany, and I'm getting all these sexual feelings coming around. And I don't know where that might lead, but I kind of think it might be fun to find out. And when you hear something like that from your spouse, you might say, oh, really? Tell me more about it. And now you're being honest. You're seeing it straightforward. And then if the spouse hearing this says, well, that would just really upset me terribly. I'd feel so insecure if you did that. Then that person would probably back away from it because they don't want you to feel insecure. And they'd probably then get their intellect, I got to not fall into this trap. I'm going to back away from that. And they probably would. But when you don't say anything and you don't have that communication, then one thing leads to another, and pretty soon you've at the point that you don't want to talk about it anymore. You can't talk about it anymore because you've broken the trust, and now you have to keep it a secret. Well, secrets always get out. The secrets don't last for a long time. You should count on that. But being upfront with it keeps integrity in the relationship. Because then if the spouse says, well, okay, I understand. Go ahead. If that's something you want to do, does that make you feel like you want to go marry that person and run off and say, oh, no, that's not it at all. I'm just in this situation where, it's a fling. I just want to fling, and then I want to come back and land on your finger again because I love you, you see? So you say, okay, go fling and come back. So it just depends on the person and the people. Relationships can't be contracts and deals. You want the person that you want your significant other to come home to you because they want to come home to you, not because they feel like it's their duty to come home to you. Who wants to be in a relationship where it's all only because the contract says, well, the contract says you're going to do this and this and this. Nobody wants to be in that kind of relationship where the only reason that the spouse comes home is because they have to. They don't want to. They really like to be someplace else with somebody else, but they come home to you because they promised. I mean, that's not a happy relationship, right? That's a relationship that needs to change, needs to go elsewhere. So you have to be open about it and see what's really important, see where the value is, and understand that the problem isn't so much your spouse straying as it is your big ego because the spouse strayed. And it's not your spouse's place to fix your ego. It's your job to fix your bent out of shape ego and just let it go and say, life is like that. People have instincts, and sometimes the situations, those instincts just overpower them. And that can happen to anyone. It's just the way people are. It's the way we're made. It's part of being human. But it doesn't mean that they don't love you or want to be with you. So if everybody says, yeah, I'd like to keep this relationship going, then just forget about it. Forget about that. Realize that you want that person to come home because they want to. And as long as they come home because they really want to, and that's where they want to be is with you, well, then if they have sexual affairs on the side now and then, is that really such a big problem? If they still love you and you're still their main core relationship? Well, it'll only bother you if it takes significant time away from you. Then it would be a bother. Like, okay, they only come home 2 days a week because they're someplace else. Well, no, that's a bother. Now it's mainly they're actually getting out of the relationship. But as long as they don't want to get out of the relationship, they want to continue it, then get your bent ego straightened out. Let all that fear go. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and hurt and how could she do this to me and all of that. Let all that nonsense go and just tell her you love her and it's okay. And you just want to be with her or him, depending on which way this goes. You just want to be with them and keep it on. See, that way you save the thing that's important and let go the thing that isn't. What most people do is they let the thing that's significant go and hang on to the junk. They hang on to that ego. Oh, they've been wronged, they've been hurt, and they carry that around with them for the next 20 years, how they suffered and have been wronged. And so they hang on to what's dysfunctional and what's high entropy, and they let go what's really good, which is the relationship they had with that person and all the time they had invested in it. You see? So that's just not good. Hang on to the stuff that's dysfunctional and throw away the stuff that's good. Throw away the trash and hang on to the stuff that's good.